All right, Bill, lots to get to, man. Happy New Year. Good to see you. Let's start with the All-American game and really some of the performances there. Really, Don McKinley was the name that really kept popping last week. What did you take away from this past week in the All-American games now in the books?
Yeah, Happy New Year, guys. Our national crew that was out there watching the Under Armour week of practices, they were inside the ropes, being able to get up close and personal with these guys as they go through drills, came away with Don McKinley being the number one defensive lineman at the Under Armour game, just in terms of his week of work. He really popped, like you said, in every way that you would have liked to see. And I think for them, everybody knows the tools that Dominic McKinley has, and he's got the prototypical size and frame and athleticism and bend and all those things. But really his technique is what shined, I think, from talking with Charles Power, our national director of scouting and rankings, and Cody Belair, who's our national scout. They were both out there and both very familiar with Don McKinley. I mean, we had him way up in the rankings, I think, as a top 20 overall prospect this time last year. And we were actually having dinner and just talking about, how high we were on him, and then to see it all come full circle and he have the best week out of all the defensive linemen was really cool for those guys to just get a little bit more validation on their work. But I think he plays with low pad level. He gets under offensive linemen. He had in the one-on-ones the most emphatic wins, is the way that Charles put it. He really just was able to just blow some of these guys off the ball. I mean, there's some really good clips on Twitter if you want to go look for him. Just search Don McKinley or search his Twitter handle that show just how powerful he could be. And I think Dom is a quiet guy. I've always said that, and I mean, he backs that up. He's quiet. And I was not necessarily worried about how he would look athletically, but you never know sometimes. A quiet guy getting into a new setting with new teammates on a national stage, how they're going to show up. And he just showed that he's one of the best defensive linemen in the country. And so that was the big takeaway from Under Armour for sure.
Another athlete that popped last week that was shining was Terrebonne wide receiver Kylin Boit. Tell me a little bit about him and his recruiting, about where they stand. I didn't know he was that explosive. I mean, he was dropping people out there in one-on-ones.
And who was that?
Is it Kylin Boit?
Yes, Kylin Boit at the All-America Bowl. I was there in San Antonio, got a chance to watch him. He was just awesome. And I think, again, you kind of get into the situation where, like Don McKinley, Dom had never really done too much in terms of camps on the national level. He did, LSU camp the summer before. He really blew up, and then did a couple other camps quietly, like colleges, but he didn't really go out on the national stage too much. Same with Kylin Boit. I was talking with him in San Antonio this week, and he said, yeah, I camped at LSU a couple times. I did 7-on-7 camp, and then I camped at Mississippi State, and that's been it. So he didn't do any of the drills that a lot of these guys go through in camps over their careers, and they're almost familiar with them on such a level that they make it look easy. Some of these national guys that are really veterans of the camp circuit, and Kylin went in there, and after having a year where the quarterback play at Terrebonne was spotty, there were multiple games in bad weather that he didn't get looks, he put on an absolute show. I think he cemented himself as one of the big risers of this week in San Antonio. He didn't look out of place physically. Athletically, we knew that he was going to be on par with some of these other top wide receivers. I mean, there's a guy like a Jeremiah Smith who's kind of a unicorn at this point. But Kylin, in terms of the rest of those four-star receivers, he really looks the part. And I think what surprised the rankings team is how crafty and technically sound he is in terms of setting things up. So he made some highlight reel catches. He had a very good week. He wasn't the guy. He wasn't Jeremiah Smith, which is fine. But he's shown now that going into his junior year, LSU brought him into camp, and he actually looked fine in the one-on-one workout with Cortez Hankton, but LSU didn't offer then, which is kind of expected. He goes out throughout his junior year, shows improvement. Then he goes into the summer, works his tail off, earns his offer from LSU, and commits. And then his senior year, again, it was just kind of tough to really get a good read on him as a prospect and evaluate him because of some of those situations. So when he was invited to this game, it was a big deal. And he showed that he's been continue to work on his craft and keep working at it. And he showed, why he's got a chance to move up a good bit here in the final rankings.
All right, Bill, expecting a commitment tomorrow from a number one player, but they got one earlier this week from a number one player at his position in Harlem Barry. What do they get in Barry? And a lot of people asking about the competition. It reminds me of Stingley a couple of years ago, playing at Dunham at a lower level, and then he goes to the summer camps and just absolutely obliterates the competition. Barry has done similar in his trek. Tell me a little bit about Barry and kind of where he is and what LSU gets.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head in terms of comparing it to Stingley's, just level of competition and just overall situation. Derek Stingley went out and I think he had like a top 5 spark performance all time at the Nike opening back when they did the opening regionals. It was, I think it was in Houston or something. I was there for that, but he just absolutely blew everybody away in all of the neutral settings. And Harlem Barry is kind of in that place. I think when he gets to his senior year, he'll once again cement himself heading into those camps in the camp circuit this offseason. But he already has the track times. He already has, I think he had a 4.43 or 4.45 back at LSU camp after his freshman year that summer when he ran. And that's when he really got on Frank Wilson's radar even more. And that ultimately led to the offer when he camped after his freshman year. And he just, like you said, he's the best player on the field for St. Martin's and just continues to show that dominant performance. I mean, I will say, like, Stingley is, probably one of the best corner prospects in the last, he is one of the best corner prospects in the last 20 years. And Harlem Barry is a very, very good running back prospect. I would suspect it's a little easier to slow down a running back if you just make that your focal point, but he still finds a way to make big plays happen. Both in the passing game, he can catch the ball, and also he's got that ability to hit the home run in the run game. We love him. We're really high on him. He's the number one running back in the country for us at On3, and he's got a chance as he continues to add mass, I think, to cement himself as that. Because he can catch the ball, he's an every down back, which is important when you're trying to project that position. He is not the biggest guy, which kind of leads to the comparison that our rankings team has on him right now with Jamal Charles, which is really, really good running back. But even Cody Belair, I was having dinner with him in San Antonio, and he kind of said, hey, the Reggie Bush comparison is lofty, but in terms of his play style, not that far off. He is electric out there on the field.
Don't tease me like that, Bill. All right, so tomorrow's a huge day, right? Bryce Underwood, number one player in the class of 2025, number one quarterback in the class of that cycle as well. LSU has been it's seemingly a front runner now for a couple of weeks here. How do you feel about this going into commitment day tomorrow?
Feeling good. All of us at the Bengal Tiger. It's one of those things that now that it's here and all the signs are pointing to LSU and it looks like it's actually going to happen, it's kind of surreal. We've covered the 2019 team. We've covered Jaden Daniels. We've covered some great prospects over the course of their careers, the Stingleys, the Jamar Chases, and all sorts of guys. But to get a number one quarterback, but also have him to be the number one prospect in the country is just pretty wild, especially that he's from Michigan. So this is just as long as everything goes through, just a historic day for LSU tomorrow. I believe around 4:30 p.m. Central is when he's going to do it. And for Joe Sloan, he's done so much for LSU with the development of Jaden Daniels, keeping Garrett Nussmeier and continuing to develop him into the quarterback that had the impressive showing in the bowl game and now looks teed up to start and be productive. And also he's gotten the quarterback room in a great situation. And who knows, maybe he ends up being the offensive coordinator. But for him to get Bryce Underwood just shows that now, I mean, he is one of the best quarterback coaches in the country. I mean, he's certainly probably on the hottest streak outside of like a Lincoln Riley. Trying to kind of think at 7:45 in the morning, so I haven't really given it much thought. But are there many guys that have put that run together in such a short period of time? So the future is very, very bright for LSU. Joe Sloan has cemented that at quarterback if they do indeed reel in Bryce Underwood. And he's just a guy who has probably one of the best arms and arm talent that we've seen over the last probably 5-10 years. And he's right up there with some of the tops in terms of pro prospects when you're looking at the quarterback position coming out of high school. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, guys like that, all on the level that Bryce Underwood's at, and he still has a senior year to go. He's an unfinished product. He can be more consistent in some of his technique, but that ball just jumps off his hand. He can move around. He can flick his wrist. He's not Mahomes in terms of like the style that he plays with and just kind of how he runs around. He's not that, but some of the off-platform throws and the weird arm angles that he does throw at kind of, look a little bit like some of the things that, or the results, I guess, that Patrick Mahomes can get out of some of his throws. So just a really, really, really impressive prospect. LSU's done a terrific job here. It looks like it's going to be them. And if it is, just, pour something up good, because that is a guy that can come in right away and challenge for time and probably deserve a little bit of time. But ultimately, he's going to be a multi-year starter, and enjoy him while he's here, because he's probably going to head to the NFL when it's all said and done.
Bill, a little bit about recruiting in today's day of age. If he does, in fact, commit tomorrow, the likelihood of closing him, finishing, hitting the finish line with a prospect like him of his status, and I'm not even talking about Bryce Underwood, the kid. I mean, I'm sure it's going to get crazy for him over the next 365 days. What does LSU have to do? Like, what type of defense do you play on a prospect like that for the next year to make sure you keep? I mean, is it NIL deals? Is it boosters? What are you lining up for a guy like him so you don't lose at the end?
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because somebody brought it up on our message board, actually, and I had thought about it too. But Dante Moore committed to Oregon and then ends up. I think it was Oregon, but Dante Moore, 5-star quarterback, another guy from Michigan, ends up committing to Oregon, and then I think coaching change at Oregon or offensive coordinator change or something. I think Kenny Dillingham left for Arizona State, and he ends up flipping late to UCLA. And those high-profile quarterback recruitments here and there, we can see that happen. But DJ Lagway even stuck with Florida this year. But for LSU, I mean, you just got to keep doing what you've been doing. I mean, this is a recruitment that Joe Sloan, the staff, has really done a nice job of checking so many boxes. They have the on-field play from this offense and what this offense can look like with a great quarterback. They have relationships built with Bryce, his family, his coaches, all of those things. And, for Bryce, he's going to command NIL. I mean, that's the reality of being the number one overall player and the number one quarterback as well. And from what we're hearing, when that's able to happen, they're in a good position to meet all of the things that you would expect you need to do for a number one overall prospect. But the defense is just getting him back to campus. And for Bryce, I think he's ready to recruit. He's played a lot of high school football. He's been to a lot of college campuses, in particular Michigan, for example, and some of those schools right around him. But a lot of those schools now have quarterback commits. They would love Bryce Underwood still, and there are other schools that would still recruit Bryce Underwood and will certainly do that. But he's made a ton of visits to LSU. I expect him to continue to do that. And when they, get close to signing day, you just kind of hope everything that you've done is enough. And I don't know, for a guy that comes from a family that is so involved with everything in terms of football and him being just so high profile for so long and managing it really well. You never say never, but I would think he would like to recruit for his class and continue to stockpile talent, because you get Bryce Underwood tomorrow, you have the number one quarterback in the country, you have the number one running back in Harlem Barry, and you have the number one wide receiver in DeCorian Moore on top of the other guys in this class that are committed. And I'll have to go back and look, but I don't know when the last time the number one at quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, the Charles Power, our national director of scouting and rankings, compared it to the triplets with the Cowboys, Troy Aikman, Michael Irvin, and Emmitt Smith. So tell us you can have that success with those guys and get them on campus. That'd be a pretty good deal.
And we can make Trey'Dez Green Jay Novacek just for fun.
There you go. There you go.
Number one tight end in the country.
I tell you, Jordy, I remember watching those Cowboys teams in the early 90s, so I knew exactly who you're talking about there.
Novacek, one of the best. All right, Bill, so two coordinator jobs open up at LSU. Let's start on the defensive side. Blake Baker's name rose to the top yesterday. I said if a deal's not struck by 5 o'clock this afternoon, by close of business today, it's probably not going to be Baker. I think he's a great fit. Are you hearing anything on this, or what's the latest on the status of this position?
Yeah, I didn't. I talked to a couple people yesterday and yesterday evening, and most of them felt like similar that Friday would be the time that you get clarity, and either he's going to stay and sign or get his deal approved or wherever it's at, or he's going to be heading down back to Baton Rouge. And depending on who you talk to, I mean, there's various levels of this is probably a sure thing. I mean, this makes a ton of sense. This is homecoming for him and his family, and his wife who played soccer at LSU, and get back to a place that he really, really enjoyed living. And then on the flip side, they do have a really good situation at Missouri, and Eli Drinkwitz is he just signed an extension. They just had a really good season, and I mean, there's that reality too. And I was talking to one source and who's an industry source, and from what I'm hearing, the compensation on this is not going to be the deciding factor. I mean, right. Both schools are ready to do what you've got to do, but eventually both sides would say, all right, just enough. This isn't, you can go out and get somebody else who's good, who wants to be there. You don't want to ever money whip somebody to be there, and then they, just are, taking their pay and just happy with that. And I don't think this is he wants a better deal from Missouri, or he wants to up the ante and just stay there and use LSU at all. I don't think that's the case. I think this is at this point, a business decision, and which involves family. And do you want to move and reset what you've built at Missouri and move it down to LSU and pick up your family and do all those things? And at the same time, you do have a really good situation at Missouri, and it's a different situation. It's not the prestige of LSU by any means, and it's not where your wife went to college and you had success and enjoyed yourself here in Baton Rouge. But it's just probably a interesting decision for Blake Baker to make. But I agree with you. I think today is probably the day we either stop hearing his name, or we hear things are heating up.
If it's not him, do you have anybody you're watching, you're eyeing?
Yeah, I think if it's not Blake Baker, and this is kind of my opinion, I think we'll see this thing maybe. There's a chance it could just kind of like extend itself out, and people, of course, are going to lose their minds. But Nick Saban made 2 hires in late February last year at coordinator positions, and he's done it before. And Brian Kelly hired Matt House after the Super Bowl, and so some of these things do take time, but I just think if they can't get Blake Baker, do they try for a guy like Jesse Minter, who has ties to Brian Kelly, who is coached under Clark Lea, who's one of Brian Kelly's close friends in the coaching industry. Do they hold out and say, all right, we've got to wait another week and a half or so for him to make him say no? There's also the reality that he could go to the NFL if Harbaugh goes. There's all sorts of things going on with Jesse Minter, the Michigan defense coordinator. And then there are a bunch of other names that have kind of been floated. Lance Guidry from Miami, who had a top 25 defense this year. There's Bob Diaco's on staff. His name has been tossed around since he's been a defensive coordinator for Brian Kelly before, multiple times. So if it's not Blake Baker, I'll be interested to see where this goes. But as of now, I believe Blake Baker's still in play.
All right, and then you got the keys to this Ferrari of this offense. Do you hand it over to somebody in house? Do you look outside? What are you hearing what they do offensively?
Yeah, if it was me, I would probably go with Joe Sloan at offense coordinator or co-offense coordinator, or however the titles work out, and hand him the keys to the car. He's coordinated offenses before, and at Louisiana Tech, and I know it was a different situation with Skip Holtz being there too, but he's been a coordinator at a good enough level and had success, and has certainly developed quarterbacks. And I mean, there are a lot of offensive coordinators out there who can catch fire with quarterback after quarterback. And I mean, they're probably not that great schematically, but I mean, it's about that quarterback. If you don't have one, I mean, your offense is, much of a wizard as you could be in the film room and on the whiteboard. You're not going to be able to get it to cook. And so I think if Joe Sloan got that promotion, I think it would work out pretty well. And then you can go out and get somebody at tight ends who could maybe be a special teams coordinator too, or if you needed to get a high-profile guy or give a promotion, it could be tight ends co-OC. You could promote Cortez Hankton to co-OC as well to keep him around. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you could go internally. And then if they went externally, I don't really know where they'd go, quite honestly. And I think it's the hard part for Brian Kelly. And, people will say, okay, well, if you promote Joe Sloan, does that tick off Cortez Hankton? Or you could just go down the rabbit hole of all these ifs. But if you bring somebody in externally, that probably says to Joe Sloan that you're not going to be a coordinator here. Mm-hmm. And so you allow him to basically move on and look and look harder at opportunities to call plays elsewhere, which then you'd have to really trust. And you don't do anything for recruiting, but you'll have to find somebody who can pick up the ball and run with it if that were to happen. But we're getting down the rabbit hole there. But I think the move would be to promote Joe Sloan.
Agree. Billy, tell our listeners how to find you tomorrow and keep up with what should be a huge day in recruiting with the number one player in the class of 25 committing.
Yeah, the BengalTiger.com. We'll have coverage today previewing the decision. We've talked to various people, so we're going to drop some kind of final notes and all those things on his recruitment as it gets really close here, probably 36-ish hours away from Bryce Underwood making his decision. You can check us out at the Bengal Tiger and subscribe for just $1.
Great to see you, Bill. Happy New Year. Have a good weekend. We'll talk soon.
Happy New Year, guys. Thanks for having me.